guzzlers, I've got some blood. I've got some pig's blood. 250 mils of nice warm pink pig's blood. Because I'm going to make some Viking blood bread. Now, the Vikings were a robust, hardy lot, coming from like Scandinavia and that. And so they needed a good, hearty, nutritious diet. And so they would live on foods that could be stored and preserved and were portable, because they were great explorers, as we all know, because they all came over here to England. Well, they didn't all come over here, but some of them did. And anyway, they needed foods they could transport. They needed foods even in their own countries where growing seasons were short, things like that. The food could be preserved, and one of which was bread. And they made bread mainly from something like rye. Now, we're bending the rules slightly here. There are no set recipes from Viking era. Okay, this is something that dates around about between the 8th and 11th centuries in Scandinavia. And the Vikings didn't keep records of recipes or anything like that. This is built from archaeological evidence. There was a grave opened in Scandinavia, a Viking aged grave, and bread was there, and when it was analysed, it had blood in it. And it's believed that part of that was to act as a preservative and also for all the nutrients that's in it. So this is sort of based on a bread that they would make, mainly using something like rye, but we're not going to make it fully out of rye because we want to get this bread to rise a bit. They also generally would have had unleavened bread. That's not to say they might not have used yeast at all. There is evidence they may have done. But we've got a sourdough starter here. So I've got 250 mils of warm pig's blood. I've got 120 grams of a freshly fed, and it's been bubbling up. It's still bubbling now, you can see, and I've just transferred that out of the main pot. And that's 100% rye starter. I've got 40 grams of honey. They used honey. I've got 90 mils of warm water. I've got 120 grams. 120 grams of rye flour. And then I've got some good old wholemeal flour. 300 grams of that. And so from that, we're going to make Viking blood bread. First thing we're going to do is we're going to mix in that honey into the blood mixture. Try and give that a bit of a stir in. Now actually this isn't fresh blood. It's quite difficult to get fresh blood, particularly, you know, you need it to get it and use it. This is dried blood that I've reconstituted. And I've got loads of it. So my intention is to do some other blood recipes. But anyway, we are then going to stir in that sourdough starter and mix that in well. Get in there. And like I say, more often than not, perhaps their bread might have just been made of their ground grains, water, salt, and flattened into sort of almost like flatbreads, cooked on hot stones, and that was their bread. But they get, you know, they hunted and they ate what they hunted, and one of the things they did was to obviously, in honour of this animal that had given its life to sustain them, they would effectively eat the bloody lot. And so blood was highly nutritious, rich in iron and vitamins and minerals and things like that. And so it was something that they would use. And like I say, it would add like a preservative effect. Now, many people are obviously off-put by the fact that it's blood, but when it comes to it, although at that stage it looks like blood, when it comes to eating it, doesn't necessarily taste like blood, or not completely anyway. Wife's refusing to eat this, by the way. So what I'm going to do first off is I'm just going to mix my flours together. And we're not going to add any salt or anything like that, because obviously we've got in a way, a saltiness from the blood. Okay, so we've got that mixed. I've got another 90ml of water, so let's get making our dough. Because I'm going to make a little bit of a wow in the centre there, and we're just going to add in that blood mixture. Now, we're going to do it by hand, but if you're a bit squeamish about such things, you can do it in your good old Viking stand mixer, or just get one of your slaves to do it. So I'm then just going to put in that water, and now we just want to mix this all together, and when it's all come together, we're going to knead it. Now, like any bread, it's going to need time to prove, so we don't need our oven on yet. Now, I've actually used a recipe that I got from old Max on Tasting History. There are, well, I'd say numerous, there are several recipes that you can find on the internet for making Viking blood bread. Remember, there are no genuine Viking recipes. It's based on, like I say, archaeological evidence, and essentially sort of how this was passed down through the centuries, pretty much verbally to begin with. But bread's bread at the end of the day. This one being, it's got a sourdough starter. We're hoping it's going to rise a bit. Right, so I'm now going to get my hands in there. One advantage of using a stand mixer, your Viking age stand mixer, or your Viking slave, is that you're going to want to knead this. It's a very sticky dough, okay, at this stage. We will, at a later stage, tip it out onto a floured surface, but for now we want to knead this for about 20 minutes. So I'm just doing your classic, trying to stretch it and fold it. I want it to lose some of its stickiness. I might still tip it out and knead it on the surface, but for now, get back your knee, you little bugger. I just want to try and get rid of some of that stickiness. And that's all it is. It's just, that is the bread. Max used, I think, double the quantities. He also didn't use any rye. He just simply used whole wheat, and I just thought, let's try and make it a little bit more authentic. Let's add some wheat flour so we do get a little bit of a better crumb to it, because we're using that sourdough starter, so it should rise a bit. And then we're going to prove it for at least an hour and a half to 2 hours, hopefully till it's doubled in size. So I've got me proofing cabinet, basket or whatever in the other room, no room in here. And when I've finished kneading this, just going to cover this over and it'll go in there. So here we are, 2 hours later. It's risen an awful lot. But what we want to do is just turn this out onto a floured surface. Won't need that bowl anymore. And it's not really going to need a lot of knocking back, to be honest. Now, I don't know if I actually finished saying, the recipe I got from Max was at least double the quantities, and he said make it into or break it up into many pieces as you want. And to be honest, I thought, given that there's only me going to be eating this, I didn't see the point of making a lot of it. So you can shape it in whatever shape you like. Okay, I'm just going to, actually what I might do is I might make it into a bit of a sort of a ball shape, if you like. Okay, and I've got here a lined baking tray already, and just going to put that onto there. Now all I'm going to do now is just cover this over, and it's now going to go back in the prover for about another hour. And before that's over, we want to put our oven on 220, okay, and we're going to bake it for about 25 minutes. So anyway, I'll see you when we're ready to put it in the oven. So that's had an hour, and my oven is up to temperature. I should have perhaps greased this or floured it, just absorbed the flour that was there. It has risen a little bit, although obviously it's not very strong gluten structure there because of that rye flour in it, so it has tended to flatten out rather than rise up too much. And the suggestion is that we slash it, but I'm not really sure it's actually going to make an awful lot of difference, to be honest. I've got no steam in there anyway, and now, like I say, that's going to go in there for about 25 plus minutes. So I'm going to put that in there for 20 to start with, and then check it, and then when it's cooked, it's going to be difficult to tell because it's quite dark, but obviously we give it a tap on the bottom and got the hollow sound, it's done, and then we'll put it on a wire rack to cool completely before we have a little taste. Here's our Viking blood bread. It's still warm. Let's just take that end crust off. Quite a dense crumb, but partly that will be because of the rye that's in it. Just a little bit moist, but again, you shouldn't really cut it when it's still hot like that. We can see that. Right, so let's have a little taste. Although I've got a bit of a cold at the minute, I think, so what it tastes like, I don't know. You get the flavour of the rye, and that's one of the things with the bread, with the blood in it. If you're using rye, the rye will really be the predominant flavour. Don't really know what blood's meant to taste like, but it's supposed to be meant to be a bit metallic-y, but I can't say I'll particularly notice one way or the other. There's a bit of an earthiness there to it. Might be a bit of a lure pack on it. Now, the Vikings would eat this with toppings. Could be salted or preserved fish, herring or cod, flaked onto the bread. Could be cheeses that they made, preserved meats, honey, wild berries, basically whatever they could find. bread. Tastes alright. I'm gonna have another bit. But I'm getting a strange urge to want to go and pillage somewhere. Must be the Viking blood bread.